Hello, my name is Kerr and we're in Irvine Old Parish Churchyard. For many years I've been conducting physical tours of the churchyard, looking at the old gravestones and the history that they can tell us. This year, however, I've decided to try the virtual tours. So I've selected half a dozen stones to look at initially, beginning with a John Fletcher, who was a very respectable man in Irvine in the 1820s. So let's go and have a look at John Fletcher. On this grave slab in front of me, you can see the name John Fletcher, surgeon in Irvine. So who was John Fletcher? John was born in Irvine in 1798, and by the time he was in his mid-20s, he was the town doctor, he was a councillor, a baillie, so he was a successful young man. He lived in the parterre. In 1826, he was also a founder member of Irvine Burns Club. So John was going places at that time. However, that year, the town council discovered that freshly interred bodies were being removed from the churchyard by a gang of body snatchers, or resurrectionists they were called in Irvine. After the inspection, it was discovered that 4 individuals were operating as a gang of body snatchers, and John was one of the 4. He was ruined socially after that, and he left the town and moved to Ayr. He died there in 1830, 4 years later. And his body was brought back here to be interred alongside his parents, where he now rests in peace. That's it. This wall plaque here is one of the oldest memorials in the churchyard. The date you can see here, 1596. And above that you can see the initials HN and NB. This was Hugh Nisbet and Margaret Bartley. It was a marriage stone, or they called it a nuptial stone, commissioned to commemorate their marriage. And in the middle here you can see the coat of arms of the Bartleys of Pearston. So obviously this is from Margaret's family. But why is this stone in this churchyard? Its original location was in the old church that was demolished in 1772 to make way for the present church building. And it was dumped in the churchyard along with other memorials from the old church. But the new minister ordered these old plaques to be built into the boulder wall and saved them for posterity. So there we have it, a love token of a couple from Irvine over 400 years ago. Just behind me, you can see a gravestone to a man called John Smith. John was a very wealthy lawyer in Irvine, and he died in 1866. In 1843, his wife gave birth to twin girls, Margaret and Agnes. Sadly, a week later, his wife died through complications of childbirth. So John was left to bring up these two wee lasses by himself. These girls were highly intelligent, so he had them privately educated. After his death, the girls were in their early 20s, and they decided they would use their freedom, their money and time to research ancient texts of the Bible. They were strong Christians, so they learned ancient Hebrew and Greek and such languages, Aramaic, and they headed off to the Holy Land to research the scriptures. And in one of these visits, they got access to a monastery, St. Catherine's Monastery, at the bottom of Mount Sinai, and they discovered 2nd century manuscripts of the Gospels, the earliest ever found at that time. After that, they were known as the Sisters of Sinai. They lived into their 80s, the Smith twins, and they were very attached to each other. Margaret's buried in Edinburgh, and Agnes is buried in Cambridge. Their family home can still be seen today in Kilwinning Road, the mansion Hamilfield. So that's the Sisters of Sinai, their father, John Smith. Irvine has a great maritime tradition, and this stone here is a good example of that. As we can see, we've got a ship in the middle. It belonged to a sailor, a man called Robert Montgomery. Robert commissioned this stone for his wife, Jean Houston, who died. She was 24. There's fascinating symbols on the stone. We've got a skull and crossbones denoting death. And these fronds here represent life after death, that contrast between earth and heaven. And here we have two additional symbols, a coffin and a sand glass. The sand glass denoting the passage of time, and that they will all end up in a coffin. That is the mortality messages the stones at this time like to get out. And just to reinforce that point, we have here this symbol, what was known as winged death, a skull, a menacing skull here, with wings. And that was there to remind onlookers that death is swooping down on them as they are looking on this stone, their time's running out. So that's Robert Montgomery, sailor of Irvine. This vandalised headstone, which is one of many in the churchyard, belongs to a man called Abraham Wales. Abraham was a butcher in Bridgegate in the 1870s. His shop was at the bottom of Hull Street, where Brown and the Bakers now is. In 1872, tragedy struck Abraham's family. In May that year, his 18-year-old daughter Rebecca died from TB, and 2 months later, her sister, Catherine, aged 16, she died from typhoid. Now, these two girls are obviously long forgotten about now in the town. However, their memory is preserved in a poem that was written at the time of their death. by a family friend. And this family friend was called John Kelly, who was known as the Poor's House poet. And this is a poem that John Kelly wrote in memory of Rebecca and Catherine Wales. More not for the early dead, those sweet and precious flowers that God in wisdom has seen fit to plant within his bowers. While here they journeyed hand in hand, they gladdened every eye, but now I trust they've met to join that glorious choir on high. They were so fair to look upon, it seems to me a dream. I scarce can think that it is true, that they have crossed death's stream. Let careless footstep never tread upon this spot so dear, for oft, when none but God can see, shall fall the bitter tear. This stone here belongs to a wee boy called James Dalrymple, who died in 1810, aged 2. In 1815, the American novelist Edgar Allan Poe came to Irvine, aged 6. He was brought here by his foster father, a man called John Allan. And while in Irvine, Edgar attended school at the local grammar school. It's just over the wall there. And part of the English lessons for the wee boys were to come into this churchyard with a slate and chalk and record interesting epitaphs. And the epitaph in this stone, almost certainly Edgar Allan Poe would have read. In Edgar Allan Poe's work, a major theme was premature burial. People being buried alive. He was obsessed with that theme, and it's possible this idea germinated in this churchyard when he was coming in here reading epitaphs. Particularly this one, it speaks from a wee boy of 2 to a young Edgar Allan Poe who would have been 6. It reads, "The stroke of death none can escape, the infant's tender heart, youth's opening bloom, manhood's ripe age, all feel his fatal dart. Reader, beware, time's on the wing, thy hour ere long shall come. The voice that bids thee now prepare speaks from an early tomb." Well, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed those, you can always like and share them. You can even come down to the churchyard yourself to further any research. Yeah, we do have more coming nearer the Murmas, so hopefully those will be worth looking out for. So thanks again.